In the 1950s, Grandma made dump-and-bake suppers that mattered. Her work in the kitchen didn't just fill plates. She made perfect three-ingredient dinners that fed families for pennies: chicken rice mushroom soup and meatball grape jelly. Every supper costs less than $1. These suppers might sound too simple today, but they kept families fed and brought comfort to every table. Let's rediscover these 30 forgotten dump-and-bake suppers that disappeared. Chicken rice, mushroom soup with peas became the most popular dump-and-bake supper in 1950s America because mothers could feed 6 people for under $2 without watching the oven. Families ate it every single week. Mothers bought chicken thighs at the butcher for 50 cents a pound. They poured 2 cups of uncooked white rice into a greased 9 by 13-inch pan. They opened 2 cans of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. They mixed the soup with 2 cups of water in a bowl. They poured the soup mixture over the rice. They placed raw chicken thighs on top of the rice. They added frozen peas if they had them. They covered the pan tightly with aluminum foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 90 minutes. The rice cooked perfectly in the soup. The chicken stayed tender and juicy. The peas added color and sweetness. Families ate it straight from the pan. The secret was never lifting the foil during baking. Lifting the foil released steam. The rice needed that steam to cook through. Home cooks who peeked ended up with crunchy rice. Tuna noodle mushroom soup with potato chips became the Friday night favorite every Catholic family made because the church banned meat and tuna was cheap. Mothers served it every Friday without fail. They boiled egg noodles until halfway cooked. They drained them completely. They mixed the noodles with 2 cans of drained tuna in a bowl. They opened 2 cans of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. They stirred the soup into the noodles and tuna. They poured everything into a greased casserole dish. They baked it at 375 degrees for 25 minutes. They crushed potato chips in their hands. They sprinkled the crushed chips over the hot casserole. They baked it 5 more minutes. The potato chips turned golden and crispy on top. The noodles were creamy and soft underneath. The tuna added protein and flavor. Kids loved the crunchy chip topping. The secret was crushing the chips by hand instead of using a rolling pin. Hand-crushed chips had different sizes. Some pieces stayed big and extra crunchy. Rolling pins made chips too fine. Before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue. Beef macaroni. Tomato sauce with cheddar became the weeknight staple mothers made because kids cleaned their plates and asked for seconds every single time. Families called it Johnny Marzetti in some towns. Mothers browned 1 pound of ground beef in a skillet. They drained the fat completely. They cooked elbow macaroni until halfway done. They drained the macaroni. They mixed the beef and macaroni in a casserole dish. They poured 2 cans of Hunt's tomato sauce over everything. They stirred it once. They covered the dish with foil. And they baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. They removed the foil. They sprinkled shredded cheddar cheese on top. They baked it 10 more minutes uncovered. The cheese melted and bubbled. The macaroni soaked up the tomato sauce. The beef stayed tender. Kids ate it with garlic bread. The secret was cooking the macaroni only halfway before baking. Fully cooked macaroni turned mushy in the oven. Halfway cooked macaroni finished perfectly while baking. It stayed firm and held its shape. Before we go, tater tot ground beef with cream of mushroom became the church potluck champion because mothers could make it in advance, and everyone loved it. Churches served it at every single gathering. Mothers browned 1 pound of ground beef in a skillet with diced onions, and they seasoned it with salt and pepper. They drained the fat. They spread the beef in the bottom of a greased 9 by 13 pan. They opened 2 cans of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. They spread the soup over the beef without mixing. They arranged frozen tater tots in rows on top. They covered every inch with tater tots. They baked it uncovered at 400 degrees for 45 minutes. The tater tots turned golden brown and crispy. The soup bubbled around the edges. The beef stayed moist underneath. Families scooped it onto plates with spatulas. The secret was arranging tater tots in neat rows instead of dumping them randomly. Neat rows cooked evenly. Random tots left some burnt and some pale. Churches always asked for the recipe. Meatball, grape jelly with barbecue sauce, became the party appetizer every mother served because guests thought it was fancy, but it took 5 minutes to make. Holiday parties always had it. Mothers bought frozen meatballs from the grocery store. They poured the frozen meatballs into a casserole dish. They didn't thaw them first. They opened a jar of Welch's grape jelly. They scooped the jelly into a bowl. They added bottled BBQ sauce to the jelly. They stirred until smooth. They poured the sauce over the frozen meatballs. They covered the dish with foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 1 hour. They stirred it halfway through. The sauce turned glossy and thick. The meatballs were tender and sweet. Guests ate them with toothpicks. Everyone asked for the recipe. The secret was using grape jelly instead of jam. Jelly melted smooth into the sauce. Jam had fruit chunks that didn't melt. The sweet and tangy flavor surprised everyone. Nobody guessed the secret ingredient was jelly. 5 dump-and-bake suppers: chicken rice mushroom soup, tuna noodle with potato chips, beef macaroni tomato, tater tot, ground beef, meatball grape jelly, each under $2. Every dish fed a family of 6. Every recipe used 3 ingredients. Every meal came from 1 pan. Every family ate them weekly. Chicken broccoli cheddar soup with rice became the one dish dinner mothers made when they were too tired to cook separate sides. It had protein, vegetables, and starch in 1 pan. Mothers cut chicken breasts into bite-sized cubes. They placed the cubes in a greased casserole dish. They poured 2 cups of uncooked white rice around the chicken. They opened 2 cans of Campbell's cheddar cheese soup. They mixed the soup with 2 cups of water. They poured the mixture over the chicken and rice. They added frozen broccoli florets on top. They covered the dish tightly with foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 1 hour. They removed the foil for the last 10 minutes. The rice absorbed all the cheesy soup. The chicken stayed moist and tender. The broccoli cooked perfectly. Kids ate the broccoli because the cheese covered it. The secret was adding broccoli frozen instead of thawed. Frozen broccoli released less water. Thawed broccoli made the casserole watery. Mothers served it with buttered rolls. Hash brown cream cheese with sour cream became the breakfast for dinner favorite every family ate because it was filling, cheap, and ready in 30 minutes. Churches called it funeral potatoes because they served it at every funeral lunch. Mothers bought a bag of frozen shredded hash browns. They thawed them slightly. They squeezed out excess water with paper towels. They spread the hash browns in a greased 9x13 pan. They cut cream cheese into cubes. They scattered the cubes over the hash browns. They dolloped sour cream across the top. They covered the pan with foil. They baked it at 375 degrees for 40 minutes. They removed the foil. They baked it 10 more minutes uncovered. The top turned golden and bubbly. The cream cheese melted into the potatoes. The sour cream added tang. Families ate it with fried eggs on top. The secret was squeezing water from the hash browns before baking. Wet hash browns made the dish soggy. Dry hash browns turned crispy on the edges. Stuffing cranberry with cream of chicken became the Thanksgiving leftover casserole every family made the day after the holiday because nobody wanted to cook anymore. It used up leftovers perfectly. Mothers sliced leftover turkey into thick pieces. They placed the turkey in a greased casserole dish. They made stovetop stuffing according to the box directions. They spread the stuffing over the turkey. They opened one can of Campbell's cream of chicken soup. They spread the soup over the stuffing without mixing. They spooned canned cranberry sauce on top. They baked it uncovered at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. The soup bubbled around the edges. The stuffing stayed moist from the soup. The cranberry sauce melted and sweetened everything. Families ate it for 3 days straight. The secret was using canned jellied cranberry sauce instead of whole berry sauce. Jellied sauce melted smooth and spread evenly. Whole berry sauce stayed chunky and didn't spread. This casserole became more popular than Thanksgiving dinner itself. Chicken Italian, dressing with Parmesan cheese, became the fancy dinner mothers made when company came over because it looked and tasted like restaurant food. Guests always asked for the recipe. Mothers placed chicken breasts in a greased baking dish. They poured 1 bottle of Kraft Italian dressing over the chicken. The dressing covered every piece completely. They sprinkled grated Parmesan cheese over the top. They covered the dish with foil. They baked it at 375 degrees for 45 minutes. They removed the foil for the last 10 minutes. The chicken turned golden on top. The Italian dressing kept it moist and flavorful. The Parmesan formed a crispy crust. Mothers served it with rice or noodles. The dressing drippings made a perfect sauce. The secret was using bottled Italian dressing instead of homemade. Bottled dressing had the perfect blend of herbs and oil. Homemade dressing separated during baking. This dish impressed guests, but took 0 skill to make. Nobody believed it was only 3 ingredients. Beef rice, French onion with green beans, became the budget stretcher mothers made when money was tight because 1 pound of beef fed the whole family. Payday was still 3 days away. Mothers browned 1 pound of ground beef with diced onions. They drained the fat completely. They spread the beef in a greased casserole dish. They poured 2 cups of uncooked white rice over the beef. They opened 2 cans of Campbell's French onion soup. They mixed the soup with 2 cups of water. They poured it over the rice and beef. They added 1 can of drained green beans. They stirred everything once. They covered the dish tightly with foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 1 hour. The rice absorbed the onion soup perfectly. The beef stayed tender. The green beans added color and nutrition. Families ate it with cornbread. The secret was stirring only once before baking. Over-stirring made the rice stick together. 1 gentle stir distributed everything evenly. 10 forgotten dump-and-bake suppers, from chicken rice to beef French onion, each feeding families for under $2. Every recipe used 3 ingredients. Every dish baked in 1 pan. Every meal saved mothers hours in the kitchen. Every family ate them weekly and never got tired of them. Ravioli marinara. Mozzarella with Italian seasoning became the emergency dinner mothers made when they forgot to plan supper because it took 10 minutes to assemble and 30 minutes to bake. Kids never complained about it. Mothers opened 2 bags of frozen cheese ravioli from the freezer. They didn't thaw them first. Frozen ravioli worked better than thawed. They poured the frozen ravioli into a greased 9 by 13-inch baking dish. They spread them in an even layer. They opened 2 jars of ragu marinara sauce. They poured the sauce over the ravioli completely. They made sure every piece was covered with sauce. They sprinkled Italian seasoning over the top. just a few shakes of dried herbs. They covered the dish tightly with aluminum foil. They baked it at 375 degrees for 30 minutes. They removed the foil carefully. Steam poured out. They sprinkled shredded mozzarella cheese over the hot ravioli. They used 2 full cups of cheese. They returned the dish to the oven uncovered. They baked it 10 more minutes. The cheese melted and bubbled. The ravioli were tender and soft. The marinara sauce was hot and flavorful. Mothers served it with garlic bread and a simple salad. Kids ate 3 helpings. The secret was using frozen ravioli instead of refrigerated ravioli. Frozen ravioli held their shape during baking. Refrigerated ravioli turned mushy and fell apart. The sauce soaked into the ravioli perfectly. Every bite tasted like homemade Italian cooking. Nobody knew it came from the freezer aisle. Mothers made this twice a week during busy seasons. Chicken, apricot, preserves with Russian dressing became the fancy company dinner mothers served because guests thought it was gourmet, but it required 0 cooking skills. Bridge club ladies always asked for the recipe. Mothers placed chicken breasts in a greased baking dish in a single layer. They used bone-in chicken for more flavor. Boneless chicken worked too, but dried out faster. They opened 1 jar of apricot preserves from the pantry. They scooped the preserves into a mixing bowl. They added 1 bottle of Kraft Russian dressing to the bowl. They stirred the mixture until smooth and combined. The sauce turned peachy orange and glossy. They poured the sauce over the chicken pieces. They made sure every piece was coated completely. They covered the dish with aluminum foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 1 hour. They removed the foil halfway through baking. They spooned sauce over the chicken again. They finished baking uncovered. The chicken turned golden and glazed. The sauce thickened and caramelized around the edges. The apricot flavor was sweet and tangy. The Russian dressing added depth and richness. Mothers served it over white rice. The sauce dripped down into the rice. Guests scraped their plates clean. The secret was basting the chicken halfway through baking. Basting kept the chicken moist and added extra glaze. Skipping the basting made the chicken dry. The sweet and tangy combination surprised everyone. It tasted like restaurant food. Bridge club ladies tried to recreate it at home, but never got it quite right. Beef cabbage, tomato juice with white rice, became the Depression-era holdover mothers still made in the 1960s because it stretched 1 pound of beef to feed 8 people. Grandmothers taught their daughters this recipe. Mothers browned 1 pound of ground beef in a large skillet. They seasoned it with salt, pepper, and garlic powder. They drained the fat completely. They spread the beef in the bottom of a deep casserole dish. They cut 1 head of cabbage into thick wedges. They placed the cabbage wedges on top of the beef. They poured 2 cups of uncooked white rice around the cabbage. They opened 1 large can of tomato juice. They poured the entire can over everything. The tomato juice covered the rice completely. They covered the dish tightly with 2 layers of foil. They baked it at 325 degrees for 2 hours. They didn't peek or stir during baking. The rice absorbed all the tomato juice. The cabbage softened and sweetened. The beef stayed moist underneath. Families ate it straight from the casserole dish. The secret was using tomato juice instead of tomato sauce. Tomato juice was thinner and soaked into the rice better. Tomato sauce was too thick and didn't distribute evenly. The long, slow baking made everything tender. The cabbage lost its strong flavor. Kids who hated cabbage ate it without complaining. Mothers made this every other week. It cost less than $1 to feed the whole family. Leftovers tasted even better the next day. Salmon lemon butter with dill seasoning became the fancy Friday dinner mothers made because it looked expensive, but canned salmon cost 50 cents. Catholics needed non-meat meals on Fridays. Mothers opened 2 cans of pink salmon. They drained the liquid completely. They removed the bones and skin carefully. They flaked the salmon into chunks. They placed the salmon in a greased baking dish. They cut 1 fresh lemon into thin slices. They laid the lemon slices on top of the salmon. They cut 4 tablespoons of butter into small pats. They placed the butter pats on top of the lemon slices. They sprinkled dried dill weed over everything. Just a few good shakes from the spice jar. They covered the dish with aluminum foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 25 minutes. They removed the foil. They baked it 5 more minutes uncovered. The butter melted and mixed with the lemon juice. The salmon stayed moist and flaky. The dill added a fresh, herby flavor. Mothers served it with boiled potatoes and peas. The lemon butter dripped onto the potatoes. Families thought it tasted like fresh fish from the market. The secret was using canned pink salmon instead of red salmon. Pink salmon was cheaper and milder in flavor. Red salmon had a stronger, fishy taste kids didn't like. The lemon and dill covered any canned flavor. This dish made canned salmon taste gourmet. Guests never guessed it came from a can. Mothers smiled and kept the secret. Cornbread mix with canned corn became the Southern comfort supper mothers made when they wanted something hearty and filling without much work. Families called it Cowboy casserole in Texas. Mothers browned 1 pound of ground beef in a skillet. They seasoned it with chili powder, salt, and pepper. They drained the fat. They spread the beef in a greased 9 by 13-inch baking dish. They opened 2 cans of whole kernel corn. They drained 1 can completely. They poured both cans over the beef. The little bit of corn juice added moisture. They stirred the beef and corn together once. They opened 1 box of Jiffy corn muffin mix. They prepared the mix according to the box directions. They poured the cornbread batter over the beef and corn. They spread it evenly with a spatula. The batter covered everything like a blanket. They baked it uncovered at 400 degrees for 25 minutes. The cornbread top turned golden brown. A toothpick came out clean. The beef and corn bubbled around the edges. Mothers cut it into squares and served it hot. Families ate it with butter on top. The cornbread soaked up the beef juices. The corn added sweetness. The secret was not draining both cans of corn. 1 can of juice kept the bottom moist. Draining both cans made the beef layer dry. The cornbread baked perfectly on top, while the beef stayed juicy underneath. Kids ate this without ketchup. That meant it was really good. Rehook. 5 more dump and bake suppers: ravioli marinara, chicken apricot Russian, beef cabbage tomato, salmon lemon dill, beef cornbread corn, each feeding families for under $2. Every dish used 3 ingredients. Every recipe took less than 10 minutes to assemble. Every family ate them weekly without complaint. Chicken salsa cheddar with sour cream became the easy Tex-Mex dinner mothers discovered in the 1970s when jarred salsa became popular in grocery stores. Kids loved the cheesy, spicy flavor. Mothers placed chicken breasts in a greased baking dish. They used 4 to 6 pieces depending on family size. They opened 1 jar of medium pace picante salsa. They poured the entire jar over the chicken. The salsa covered every piece completely. They covered the dish with aluminum foil. They baked it at 375 degrees for 45 minutes. The chicken cooked through completely. They removed the foil. They sprinkled 2 cups of shredded cheddar cheese over the hot chicken. They returned it to the oven uncovered. They baked it 10 more minutes. The cheese melted into the salsa. They removed it from the oven. They dolloped sour cream on top of each piece. Mothers served it with Spanish rice and refried beans. Kids ate it with flour tortillas. They rolled the chicken and salsa into tortillas like burritos. The secret was using jarred salsa instead of fresh salsa. Jarred salsa had the right consistency for baking. Fresh salsa was too watery and made the dish soupy. The salsa kept the chicken incredibly moist. The cheese added creaminess. The sour cream cooled down the spice. This dish became a weekly favorite. Mothers made extra because everyone wanted seconds. Leftovers were perfect for tacos the next day. The Tex-Mex flavors were a welcome change from mushroom soup casseroles. Fish fillets, lemon with butter pats, became the quick Friday supper mothers made when they worked late because it baked in 20 minutes. Catholic families ate fish every Friday without exception. Mothers bought frozen fish fillets from the grocery store. Cod, haddock, or flounder all worked perfectly. They didn't thaw the fish first. They placed the frozen fillets in a greased baking dish. They arranged them in a single layer without overlapping. They cut one fresh lemon into thin round slices. They placed lemon slices on top of each fillet, 2 or 3 slices per piece. They cut cold butter into small pats. They placed butter pats on top of the lemon slices, 1 tablespoon of butter per fillet. They sprinkled salt, pepper, and paprika over everything, just a light dusting of spices. They covered the dish loosely with foil. They baked it at 400 degrees for 20 minutes. The fish turned white and flaky. The butter melted into the lemon juice. The lemon butter pooled in the bottom of the dish. Mothers served the fish with the lemon butter spooned over the top. Families ate it with tartar sauce and French fries. The secret was baking fish from frozen instead of thawing it first. Frozen fish stayed firm and didn't fall apart. Thawed fish turned mushy and broke into pieces. The high temperature cooked it quickly without drying it out. The lemon butter kept everything moist. This simple preparation let the fish flavor shine. No breading or frying required. It was the healthiest Friday dinner mothers made all year. Beef stew, meat carrots with baby potatoes became the Sunday afternoon dinner mothers started before church because it cooked slowly while they were gone. They came home to a ready meal. Mothers bought beef stew meat cut into cubes. They placed the meat in a large casserole dish with a lid. They added baby carrots around the meat. 1 pound of carrots was enough. They added baby potatoes around the meat, too. They left the skins on the potatoes. They opened 1 packet of Lipton onion soup mix. They sprinkled the dry mix over the meat and vegetables. They poured 2 cups of water into the dish. They covered the dish tightly with the lid. They placed it in the oven at 275 degrees. They left for church. They baked it for 4 hours. They came home to the smell of pot roast. The meat was fork tender. The carrots were soft and sweet. The potatoes were creamy inside. The onion soup made rich gravy. Mothers served it in bowls with the gravy. Families ate it with buttered bread for dipping. The secret was the low temperature and long cooking time. High heat made the meat tough. Low heat made it melt in your mouth tender. The onion soup mix added all the seasoning needed. No salt or pepper required. This was Sunday comfort food at its finest. The house smelled amazing all afternoon. Mothers looked like cooking heroes without doing any work. Chicken mushroom soup with onion powder became the midweek staple mothers made because they always had these 3 ingredients in the house. No grocery shopping required. Mothers placed chicken pieces in a greased baking dish. Thighs, drumsticks, or breasts all worked equally well. They opened 2 cans of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. They didn't dilute the soup with water. They spread the thick soup over the chicken pieces. They covered every piece completely with soup. They sprinkled onion powder over the top. A few good shakes from the spice jar. The soup bubbled and thickened. Mothers served it over white rice or egg noodles. The mushroom soup made perfect gravy. Families poured the gravy over everything. The secret was not diluting the soup with water. Straight from the canned soup stayed thick and creamy. Diluted soup turned thin and watery. The undiluted soup clung to the chicken. It created a thick, rich sauce. The onion powder enhanced the mushroom flavor. Kids ate this without complaining. The mild mushroom flavor wasn't too strong. Mothers made this every single week. It never got boring. Different chicken pieces kept it interesting. One week drumsticks, next week breasts. The reliable recipe saved mothers from decision fatigue. They could make it without thinking. Turkey, rice, cream, celery, soup with mixed vegetables became the leftover transformation mothers made after Thanksgiving because nobody wanted plain turkey sandwiches anymore. This casserole felt like a brand new meal. Mothers diced leftover turkey into bite-sized pieces. They spread the turkey in a greased casserole dish. They poured 2 cups of uncooked white rice around the turkey. They opened 2 cans of Campbell's cream of celery soup. They mixed the soup with 3 cups of water in a bowl. They poured the mixture over the turkey and rice. They added 1 bag of frozen mixed vegetables: peas, carrots, corn, and green beans. They stirred everything together gently. They covered the dish tightly with foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 1 hour. The rice absorbed all the liquid. The vegetables cooked perfectly. The turkey stayed moist and tender. The cream of celery soup added savory flavor. Families ate it for 3 days straight. The secret was using cream of celery soup instead of cream of chicken soup. Everyone was tired of chicken flavor after Thanksgiving. Celery soup tasted different and refreshing. The mixed vegetables added color and nutrition. The rice made it filling and hearty. This casserole cleared out Thanksgiving leftovers completely. Mothers didn't waste a single bite of turkey. Families were grateful for something different. The casserole tasted nothing like Thanksgiving dinner. It felt like a whole new recipe. Mothers made it every year the Monday after Thanksgiving. It became a family tradition. 10 more forgotten dump and bake suppers, from chicken salsa to turkey rice celery, each feeding families for under $2. Every dish used 3 ingredients. Every recipe is baked in 1 pan. Every meal saved mothers time and money. Every family ate them weekly and never grew tired of them. Chicken wings. Soy sauce with honey glaze became the game day appetizer mothers discovered in the 1970s because sports fans demanded something different from plain hot wings. Fathers ate a dozen each during football season. Mothers bought 5 pounds of chicken wings from the butcher. Wings were cheap because nobody wanted them yet. Buffalo wings hadn't become famous yet. Mothers separated the wings at the joints. They cut off the wing tips and saved them for soup stock. They placed the wing pieces in a large baking dish in a single layer. They didn't overlap the pieces. They opened 1 bottle of Kikkoman soy sauce. They poured the soy sauce over the wings. They used half the bottle. The soy sauce pooled in the bottom of the dish. They opened 1 jar of honey. They drizzled honey over every wing piece. They used about half a cup of honey. The honey mixed with the soy sauce. They stirred the wings once to coat them completely. They covered the dish with aluminum foil. They baked the wings at 375 degrees for 45 minutes. They removed the foil. They flipped each wing over with tongs. They basted the wings with the sauce from the bottom of the pan. They returned the dish to the oven uncovered. They baked the wings 30 more minutes. They flipped them again halfway through. The wings turned dark brown and sticky. The sauce reduced into a thick glaze. The soy sauce added salty, savory flavor. The honey caramelized and added sweetness. Mothers piled the wings on a platter. Fathers ate them with their fingers. They licked the sticky glaze off their fingers. The secret was flipping the wings multiple times during baking. Flipping coated every side with glaze. Wings that weren't flipped stayed pale on one side. The long baking time made the skin crispy. The sauce thickened into a perfect glaze consistency. This recipe made wings taste like Chinese takeout. Families fought over the last wing. Mothers doubled the recipe every time. 5 pounds was never enough. The soy-honey combination became a party favorite. Neighbors asked mothers to bring them to every potluck. These wings disappeared before anything else. The empty platter proved how good they were. Mothers kept the simple recipe secret for years. They liked being the wing champion of the neighborhood. Nobody guessed it was only 3 ingredients: beef bell peppers, onions with tomato sauce became the sheetpan supper mothers made when they wanted minimal cleanup because everything cooked on one pan. Busy weeknights demanded easy solutions. Mothers sliced 2 pounds of beef sirloin into thin strips. They sliced against the grain for tender meat. They placed the beef strips on a large greased sheet pan. They sliced 3 bell peppers into thick strips. Red, green, and yellow peppers added color. They placed the pepper strips on the sheet pan with the beef. They sliced 2 large white onions into thick rings. They scattered the onion rings across the pan. They drizzled everything with olive oil. They sprinkled salt, pepper, and garlic powder over the top. They opened 2 cans of Hunt's tomato sauce. They poured the tomato sauce over everything on the pan. The sauce covered all the meat and vegetables. They didn't stir or mix anything. They left everything spread out in a single layer. They placed the sheet pan in the oven. They baked it uncovered at 400 degrees for 35 minutes. They stirred everything once, halfway through baking. The beef cooked through completely. The peppers and onions softened and caramelized. The tomato sauce thickened and reduced. The edges of the vegetables turned slightly charred. Mothers served it over white rice or egg noodles. The tomato sauce mixed with the beef juices made perfect gravy, and families poured extra sauce over their rice. The secret was using a very hot oven temperature. High heat caramelized the vegetables and gave them flavor. Low heat made them soggy and mushy. The sheet pan method meant 0 pots to wash. Mothers cleaned 1 pan and called it done. This meal tasted like steak and peppers from an Italian restaurant. The simple ingredients transformed into something special. The tomato sauce tied everything together. Kids ate their vegetables without complaining because the sauce covered them. Mothers made this twice a week during soccer season. Quick assembly meant more time for carpool and homework help. The recipe worked with chicken strips, too. Mothers swapped proteins based on what was on sale. The flexibility made this a true weeknight hero. Sheet pan suppers saved mothers hours of cleanup time. On 1 pan meant more time with family after dinner. These 30 minutes in the oven gave mothers a break they desperately needed. Chicken Coca-Cola with brown sugar glaze became the viral recipe mothers discovered at church potlucks because everyone asked what made the chicken so sweet and tender. The secret ingredient shocked everyone. Mothers placed chicken pieces in a greased 9 by 13-inch baking dish. Thighs and drumsticks worked better than breasts. Dark meat stayed moist during long baking. They opened 1 bottle of Coca-Cola. They poured the entire bottle over the chicken pieces. The Coke covered the chicken completely. They scooped brown sugar into a measuring cup. They sprinkled 1 cup of packed brown sugar over the Coke and chicken. The sugar dissolved slowly into the Coke. They covered the dish tightly with aluminum foil. They placed it in the oven at 325 degrees. They baked it for 2 full hours. They didn't peek or open the foil. After 2 hours, they removed the foil carefully. Steam poured out. The chicken was falling off the bone. The Coke had reduced into a thick, dark glaze. Brown sugar had caramelized completely. They basted the chicken with the glaze from the bottom of the pan. They returned it to the oven uncovered. They baked it 15 more minutes. The glaze thickened even more. The chicken turned dark brown and sticky. Mothers served it hot from the oven. Families ate it with mashed potatoes and green beans. The glaze dripped onto the potatoes. The secret was using regular Coca-Cola instead of diet soda. Regular Coke had sugar that caramelized during baking. Diet Coke turned bitter and didn't create glaze. The long, slow baking time made the chicken incredibly tender. The Coke broke down the meat fibers. The brown sugar added deep molasses flavor. The combination tasted like barbecue sauce without any smoke flavor. Kids who hated barbecue sauce loved this chicken. The sweetness wasn't overwhelming. The Coke added a hint of spice from the cola flavor. Mothers made this for every potluck and family reunion. It became their signature dish. Nobody ever guessed the secret ingredient was soda. When mothers finally revealed it, everyone was shocked. They ran home to try it themselves. The recipe spread through churches and neighborhoods like wildfire. Coca-Cola sales went up in small towns. Mothers bought extra bottles just for baking. This recipe proved that simple ingredients could create magic. 3 ingredients created restaurant-quality chicken at home. Turkey biscuits with country gravy mix became the comfort food casserole mothers made when they craved breakfast for dinner because it was filling, cheap, and everyone loved it. Kids called it turkey and biscuits. Mothers cooked ground turkey in a large skillet. They used 2 pounds of ground turkey. They broke it apart with a wooden spoon as it cooked. They seasoned it with salt, pepper, and sage. Sage added Thanksgiving flavor. They drained any excess liquid from the pan. They spread the cooked turkey in a greased 9 by 13-inch baking dish. They opened 2 packets of Pioneer Country gravy mix. They followed the package directions to make the gravy. They whisked the mix with milk and cooked it until thick. They poured the hot gravy over the turkey in the baking dish. The gravy covered the turkey completely. They opened 2 cans of Pillsbury Grands biscuits. They separated the biscuits. They placed the biscuits on top of the gravy and turkey. They covered the entire surface with biscuits. They didn't overlap the biscuits too much. They left a little space between each one. They placed the dish in the oven uncovered. They baked it at 375 degrees for 25 minutes. The biscuits turned golden brown on top. They puffed up tall and fluffy. The gravy bubbled around the edges of the biscuits. Mothers scooped servings onto plates. Each serving had turkey, gravy, and biscuits together. Families poured extra gravy over their servings. The secret was using refrigerated biscuits instead of homemade biscuits. Refrigerated biscuits baked perfectly in the time it took to heat the casserole. Homemade biscuits took too long and dried out the turkey. The country gravy mix had the perfect seasoning blend. Homemade gravy was too much work for a weeknight. The combination of turkey and gravy reminded everyone of Thanksgiving dinner. But this version was ready in 40 minutes instead of all day. Kids ate this without ketchup or complaints. That proved it was truly good. Mothers made this every other week during winter. The warm, savory meal comforted families on cold nights. Leftovers were perfect for lunch the next day. The biscuits soaked up the gravy overnight. Reheated portions tasted even better than fresh. This casserole became a family tradition that mothers passed down to their daughters. Simple ingredients created maximum comfort. Saltine crackers with cream soup became the Depression-era recipe mothers still made in the 1970s because their mothers and grandmothers taught them to never waste food. Every ingredient served a purpose. Mothers opened 3 cans of tuna fish. They drained the water completely. They flaked the tuna into a mixing bowl with a fork. They crushed 2 sleeves of saltine crackers into crumbs. They used a rolling pin or their hands. Some crumbs were fine, some were chunky. They added the cracker crumbs to the tuna. They opened 2 cans of Campbell's cream of celery soup. They poured the soup into the tuna and crackers. They didn't add water or milk. They stirred everything together until well combined. The mixture was thick and held together. They spread the mixture into a greased casserole dish. They pressed it down evenly with the back of a spoon. Fine crumbs held the casserole together. Chunky crumbs added texture. All fine crumbs made it dense and heavy. The cream of celery soup added moisture and flavor. The soup acted as the binder. The tuna added protein and heartiness. This recipe stretched 3 cans of tuna to feed 8 people. Grandmothers made this during the Depression when money was scarce. Mothers continued making it because it reminded them of childhood. The nostalgic flavor brought comfort. Kids didn't understand why mothers loved this simple casserole so much. The emotional connection made it taste better. Mothers served it with tomato soup and a simple salad. The meal cost less than $2 total. During tight budget weeks, mothers returned to these Depression recipes. They proved that good food didn't require expensive ingredients. Simple pantry staples created filling, satisfying meals. This casserole represented resilience and resourcefulness. Every bite honored the grandmothers who survived hard times. Mothers felt connected to their family history through this recipe. 3 humble ingredients told a story of survival and love. 5 more forgotten dump-and-bake suppers: chicken wings, soy honey, beef peppers, tomato, chicken Coca-Cola, turkey biscuits, gravy, tuna crackers soup, each feeding families for under $2. Every dish used 3 ingredients. Every meal told a story. Every recipe saved mothers time and money. Beef cubed potatoes with onion soup mix became the foil packet dinner mothers made for camping trips and backyard cookouts because it cooked perfectly over a fire or on the grill. Fathers taught kids how to make these. Mothers bought beef stew meat cut into 1-inch cubes. They used 2 pounds for the family. They washed and cubed red potatoes into 1-inch pieces. They left the skins on for nutrition and texture. They placed the beef and potatoes in a large mixing bowl. They opened 1 packet of Lipton onion soup mix. They sprinkled the entire packet over the beef and potatoes. They tossed everything together with their hands. They tore off large sheets of heavy-duty aluminum foil. They folded the foil up around the mixture. They placed the foil packets directly on hot coals or grill grates. They cooked them for 45 minutes. They flipped the packets halfway through cooking. The beef became tender. The potatoes cooked through completely. The onion soup mix made its own gravy inside the packets. Families carefully opened the hot foil packets. Steam poured out. They ate directly from the foil or dumped it onto plates. The secret was using heavy-duty foil and sealing the packets tightly. Kids loved making their own individual packets. They felt grown-up cooking over the fire. Mothers made these in the oven, too, during winter. They baked the packets at 400 degrees for 1 hour. Chicken apple slices. With cinnamon sugar became the fall favorite mothers made when apple season arrived because the sweet and savory combination surprised everyone in the best way. Grandmothers brought this recipe from Germany. Mothers placed chicken breasts in a greased baking dish. They used 4 large chicken breasts. They pounded them slightly to even thickness. Even thickness meant even cooking. They cored and sliced 4 large apples into thick wedges. Granny Smith apples worked best because they stayed firm. Red Delicious apples turned to mush. They arranged the apple slices around and on top of the chicken. They covered every piece of chicken with apples. They mixed cinnamon and sugar together in a small bowl. They used 2 tablespoons of cinnamon and half a cup of sugar. They sprinkled the cinnamon sugar over the chicken and apples. They dotted the top with small butter pats, about 4 tablespoons of butter total. They covered the dish with aluminum foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. They baked it 15 more minutes uncovered. The apples softened and caramelized. The cinnamon sugar melted into a glaze. The butter created a sauce at the bottom of the pan. The chicken stayed incredibly moist under the apples. Mothers served it with the apple slices on top. When the sauce from the pan drizzled over everything, families ate it with mashed potatoes and green beans. The secret was using tart apples instead of sweet apples. Tart apples balanced the sugar. Sweet apples made the dish too sugary. The cinnamon added warmth without being overwhelming. The combination tasted like apple pie and chicken together. Kids who claimed to hate fruit ate the apples because they tasted like dessert. The chicken absorbed the apple and cinnamon flavors. Every bite was sweet and savory at once. Mothers made this every October when apples were fresh and cheap. Orchards sold bushels of apples for $3. One bushel made this recipe 6 times. The fall flavors made the house smell like Thanksgiving. Neighbors knocked on the door asking what smelled so good. Mothers invited them to stay for dinner. This recipe turned skeptics into believers. Nobody expected chicken and apples to work together, but one bite proved it was genius. German grandmothers knew what they were doing. 3 simple ingredients created an unforgettable meal. Salmon dill with sour cream sauce became the elegant dinner mothers served when they wanted to impress guests without spending hours in the kitchen. Bridge club friends thought mothers were gourmet cooks. Mothers bought fresh salmon fillets from the fish counter. 4 fillets fed a family perfectly. They placed the salmon skin side down in a greased baking dish. They left space between each fillet. They opened a container of sour cream. They scooped the sour cream into a small bowl. They added dried dill weed to the sour cream. 2 tablespoons of dried dill was enough. Fresh dill worked too, but dried dill was easier. They stirred the sour cream and dill together. The mixture turned green speckled. They spread the sour cream mixture over each salmon fillet. They covered the top of each piece completely. The sour cream acted as a protective layer. They placed the dish in the oven uncovered. They baked it at 375 degrees for 25 minutes. The salmon cooked through but stayed moist. The sour cream formed a golden crust on top. The dill flavor infused into the salmon. Mothers served it immediately with lemon wedges on the side. Families squeezed lemon juice over their salmon. The secret was not overcooking the salmon. Overcooked salmon turned dry and chalky. Properly cooked salmon flaked easily with a fork. The sour cream kept the salmon moist during baking. Without the sour cream, salmon dried out easily. The dill added a fresh, herby flavor that complemented fish perfectly. The combination tasted like expensive restaurant salmon. Guests asked what fancy restaurant catered the dinner. Mothers smiled and said they made it themselves. The 3-ingredient secret stayed hidden. Mushroom beef, green beans. With cream of mushroom became the one-pot wonder mothers made when they needed dinner on the table in under an hour because soccer practice ended at 6. Quick and filling won every time. Mothers browned 2 pounds of ground beef in a large skillet. They broke it apart into small crumbles. They seasoned it with salt, pepper, and garlic powder. They drained the excess fat. They spread the beef in a greased 9 by 13-inch baking dish. They opened 3 cans of green beans. They drained the beans completely. Watery green beans made the casserole soupy. They spread the drained green beans over the beef. They covered the beef completely with beans. They opened 2 cans of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. They spread the soup over the green beans. They used a spoon to spread it evenly, didn't add water or milk to the soup. Undiluted soup stayed thick and creamy. They covered the dish with aluminum foil. They baked it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. They removed the foil. They baked it 10 more minutes uncovered. Soup bubbled and turned golden on top. Green beans were hot and tender. The beef stayed moist underneath. Mothers served it with mashed potatoes or rice. The mushroom soup acted as gravy. Families poured it over their potatoes. The secret was using canned green beans instead of frozen green beans. Canned beans were already cooked and tender. Frozen beans released too much water during baking. The extra water made the casserole watery and thin. Canned beans kept the dish thick and hearty. The cream of mushroom soup tied everything together. The mild flavor pleased even picky eaters. Kids ate their green beans without complaining because the soup covered them. Mothers appreciated any recipe that made vegetable eating easier. This casserole reheated beautifully for leftovers. The flavors blended together overnight. Reheated portions tasted even better than fresh. Mothers made double batches and froze half for emergency dinners. Frozen casseroles baked straight from the freezer. They just added 15 extra minutes to the baking time. Meatball, marinara with shredded Parmesan became the Italian comfort dinner mothers made when they wanted something that felt special without the work of homemade meatballs. Store-bought meatballs saved hours. Mothers bought 2 bags of frozen meatballs from the grocery store. Italian-style meatballs were the best choice. Plain meatballs worked too. They poured the frozen meatballs into a large baking dish. They didn't thaw them first. Frozen meatballs baked perfectly. They opened 2 jars of Prego marinara sauce. They poured both jars over the frozen meatballs. They stirred gently to coat all the meatballs. The sauce covered every meatball completely. They covered the dish tightly with aluminum foil. They baked it at 375 degrees for 50 minutes. They removed the foil carefully. Steam poured out. Meatballs were cooked through and tender. The sauce was bubbling hot. They sprinkled 2 cups of shredded Parmesan cheese over the top. They used the real shredded Parmesan, not the powdered kind. They returned the dish to the oven uncovered. They baked it 10 more minutes. The Parmesan melted into the sauce. The cheese turned golden around the edges. Mothers served the meatballs over spaghetti or with garlic bread. Families twirled the spaghetti around their forks. The marinara sauce coated every strand. The Parmesan added salty, nutty flavor. The secret was using jarred marinara instead of plain tomato sauce. Marinara had herbs and seasoning already mixed in. Plain tomato sauce tasted flat and needed extra spices. Jarred sauce meant 1 less step. The frozen meatballs were another time saver. Homemade meatballs required mixing, rolling, and browning. Frozen meatballs went straight from freezer to oven. The result tasted exactly the same. Guests couldn't tell the meatballs were store-bought. The sauce and cheese made everything taste homemade. This recipe proved that shortcuts didn't sacrifice quality. Busy mothers needed shortcuts to survive. Working mothers didn't have time to roll meatballs by hand. Store-bought shortcuts gave them more time with their families. And dinner still tasted delicious and comforting. Kids ate seconds and thirds. The Italian flavors satisfied everyone. Mothers made this for birthday dinners and casual Fridays. These 30 forgotten dump-and-bake suppers fed working families for 50 years. Grandmothers made chicken rice mushroom soup after long days at the factory. Mothers made tuna noodle with potato chips every Friday without fail. Families ate beef macaroni tomato sauce and asked for seconds. Every supper cost less than $2. Every dish fed a family of 6. Every recipe used only 3 ingredients. Grandmothers dumped ingredients into 1 pan and walked away. No stirring, no watching, no stress. The oven did all the work. These suppers kept families fed during tight budgets and busy schedules. The simple method gave mothers time to help with homework and talk to their children. Dump-and-bake recipes weren't just about easy cooking. They were about having more time for the people who mattered most. These 30 recipes proved that good food didn't require fancy ingredients or complicated techniques. 3 simple ingredients created comfort, satisfaction, and memories around the dinner table. Which dump-and-bake supper did your grandmother make? Drop the name in the comments below. Tag someone who remembers eating these meals every week. Share this story so these forgotten recipes stay alive forever. Let's bring back the dump and bake tradition together.